Welcome back, everybody. Week 3 of the tour managing webinar for SoundGirls.org. The first week, we covered a whole bunch of questions that came in beforehand. And then last week, we focused on the advancing portion of what all of the things that you need to do before you head out on tour. Week 3, and now we're at week 3, and today is we're going to focus on day of show. But if you want to watch the other two sessions, you can find them on soundgirls.org, the website, and you can also find them on YouTube if you just search for the SoundGirls channel. Again, I'm just going to take a really quick moment with everybody so that you guys can introduce yourselves and let everybody know who you are. I'll start. I'm Misty Roberts. I'm a production coordinator and tour manager, and I've been at this for a little over 20 years now. And I'm going to say, Mary, tell us about yourself.
My name is Mary. I've been doing it for a little over 15 years now, and that's about it.
Max, you're up next.
Hey, my name is Max. I've been touring for just over 5 years now, mostly as a tour manager front of house with a whole broad range of different bands across North America and Europe.
And Dana.
Hi, I'm Dana. I've been touring since approximately 2000, full-time since 2003, internationally as front of house, monitors, and tour manager.
And Tiff, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Tiffany. I'm a tour manager and front of house engineer. I've been touring for about 5 years, and I also have 2 venue jobs in St. Louis, Missouri.
Awesome. Well, like I said, what we're going to talk about today is the actual day of show process, and I'm really excited because I'm always interested in hearing, what anybody else's day of show process looks like, and finding out if there's anything that I can add to my already existing processes. So, Dana, I think we're going to start with you, and I would like you to walk us through, just how does your day start? First thing.
Well, it depends on what kind of tour you're on. If you're on a bus or in a van, you're going to have a totally different morning. And I'll just kind of walk through chunks of time. Say you wake up and you're on a bus. As a tour manager, the first thing you'll do is check in with the bus driver if you're still moving. And if they're on the bus, they might have parked up already, and you'll be, maybe they're, working on the generator or something. My priority at that point is to get my bus driver's hotel room so that they can sleep and be well rested for the drive that evening. Also getting day rooms if I have them for the band. And, usually if you're on a bus, you should end up sometimes somewhere like in the mid-morning, depending on what the drive was like that evening. So you'll have some time to do some work, for example, or get some breakfast, get a shower if you're lucky, and until you have load-in, which if you're on a bus, typically load-ins will be somewhere around the range of like noon to like 2 p.m., depending on how big your production is. And then if you're in a van, you wake up in your hotel room, you make a coffee, and the first thing I do is I email a day sheet to everybody in the touring party. If you may have like master tour, you may have a Google Calendar for everybody, but I guarantee you not everybody's going to look at it. So send the most updated information first thing in the morning, subject matter with the lobby call so that they can't miss it, which they will, but you do what you can, and make sure that you're downstairs and starting checkout when people are loading the van up with their suitcases. And yeah, that's the morning. Then you travel. and you just keep track of time. And when the venue opens to you, say you're on a bus, maybe there'll be a shower in the venue, or you'll have like light catering a couple hours before load in, depending on the venue. You'd be in touch with your day of show contact beforehand and confirm the time. If there's showers, confirm that you'll have shower towels. If you're in a van and you're approaching the venue, I usually call about half an hour beforehand, sometimes earlier, depending on the parking situation. Say, for example, if there's street parking, and maybe if there's a custodian in the venue, they'll put cones out for you so that you don't have to search for parking before load-in. And that's the first half of the day, essentially.
One thing I want to cover before we move on is the importance of, if something happens, keeping in touch with your venue contact.
Yes.
If you're,
which happens all the time.
It does. If you're 45 minutes outside of town at a hotel and your bus breaks down, or just keeping everybody in the venue abreast of when you're actually going to get there is pretty important. If I can't get a hold of someone that's at the actual venue, then I will hopefully call one of my techs that is already there setting things up and let them know to let everyone know.
If you're in a van tour as a tour manager / front of house, what I'll do, first I make sure I always do the early drive so I'm available to be on the phone upon approach to the venue, but I will make sure that the venue contact and or the sound engineer, if I have their contact number, I'll say just start running lines. You have our input list. You can start running lines, and which mics that we're carrying and which mics you have. So if we're going to be 45 minutes late, it'll save a lot of time. You have our stage plot, you have our input list. You can get started, and it would be a huge help. And thank you so much. And you're the greatest. And we'll get there as soon as possible. And I'm terribly sorry. There was construction or a traffic accident on the highway, so just be kind, and, just the more work that they do ahead of time. And depending, I've worked at house venues where the crew comes in an hour early and does all this before load in. That's great. Doesn't happen all the time. So
when you arrive at the venue, what's the first thing that you do?
I try to meet the staff, whoever's taking care of us. Usually it's promoter, production manager, stage manager, sound engineers, anybody that is involved in the production. Again, depending on what kind of tour you're on, that could be one person, that could be 3 people, but definitely promoter, rep if they're there. If they're not there, it usually means they're shopping for hospitality, but I make sure that they introduce themselves when they come. But definitely just getting, and if you have local hands, for example, getting them corralled, introduce yourself, open up the trailer, and make sure that it's obvious what goes in and what stays on the trailer. I usually I have colored tape that I'll put on things that go into the venue, and on that tape it has stage position too. So everything's not just thrown on the floor and jumbled. Right. So.
Do you make sure when you're loading out later at night that the pack is appropriate, like stuff that stays on the trailer maybe goes towards the back?
There's usually there's somebody designated on the tour that is in charge of the pack. If it's a bus tour with a trailer, it'll be, say, our backline techs, the people who handle the gear the most. Mm-hmm. If it's a van tour and you have a trailer or just like the back of the Sprinter, it's usually one person's in the van that knows how to do the Tetris pack, and then we all the hands are on deck helping to load in, or load out rather. And also I have somebody designated, maybe if they're not carrying stuff, that they're watching out to make sure nothing's picked up by a random drunk person walking down the street. Which
had that happen.
Yeah, I think everybody must have at some point. Yeah. So security, getting things in the right order. So having that clear line of communication, which is why I do like to introduce myself with my name and just let people know I'm the point person. If you have any questions, ask me. If I don't know, I can delegate the question or the order of the loadout to the person who's in charge.
When you go into the venue after starting the load-in process, who are the key people that you look forward to introduce yourself to?
Well, as a sound engineer, the house audio people directly, I have my USB stick with my show file, and I'll clear with them first to make sure that I can load. Sometimes they want to run a test, some kind of a diagnostic test. I know, say for example, the Showbox in Seattle, they'll run a virus check on your USB stick to make sure you don't corrupt a console, which is thankfully never happened to me, but would be super embarrassing if it did. Make sure that they're good. Make sure I show the band the dressing room. Make sure that the promoter, whoever's assisting me with hospitality, knows to come to me, but also, try to keep it casual so that everybody feels like they have a line of communication, because if you are juggling two jobs, maybe they want a certain kind of beer, but you're at front of house and the promoter will be backstage asking the artist, So you want to make the artist comfortable in that situation, if that is the case.
I always make sure, when I would go into places, that I met the house production manager, the house front of house, the house monitor engineer, the promoter rep, if there was one, whoever the hospitality person was. One that always seems to get kind of put by the wayside or forgotten: who's handling the merch? You need to meet whoever it is in the venue that's handling the merch, because you just want to get that out of the way as quick as possible. That count in, count out process. Yeah, exactly.
Typically, if you're touring with a merch person, which hopefully you are, because that's ideal, that I try to make them as self-sustainable as possible. I will make sure that they meet the promoter, because they will know who is counting in and counting out with them at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And if you're using a local merch person, I wouldn't expect them to come to close till doors, because then you're not paying them to sit around for sound check, unless you have a massive amount of merch that they have to count in. But typically you're not going to be carrying thousands of items. You might like leave half of your stock in the van if you're not selling a ton. So it's a much easier transaction at the end of the night. But the merch, if you are using a local merch person, make sure that they have your number. If they need a restock and you're the only one that can do it at that time, that's part of the job for sure. And, just find out where to dump it, and then at the top of the day, because sometimes the tables aren't out. Make sure you advance for enough tables for merch and lights. If it's like a club situation and you need clip lights, make sure you advance for them, or buy $5 clip lights at Home Depot.
Yeah. Do any of you guys have anyone else that you make sure when you go into the venue that you meet up with?
If I'm the support act and I have not touched base with the headliner's tour manager yet today, I'll go say hi, make sure they know I'm around.
Yeah. So after that part, so you get your band, kind of settled in the dressing room, having them get, one of the things that I always do when I get them into their dressing room is there anything that you guys need from the stage? Is there anything that, I need to bring back here that you need to work on? Any of your equipment? Anything you want to make tweaks to that you could be doing while everything's getting set up? I think that's gives them a good opportunity, first of all, to kind of get into the headspace. Oh, we're at the show now. We're here. It's time to work. Yeah, so that they're really ready to go into sound check.
I have had several artists that require like a wardrobe, rolling rack, mirror, a place to lay down makeup and sort out wardrobe and clothing and jewelry and accessories and all that stuff, because that actually is can be quite a lengthy process for some artists, and making sure that they have that space at the top of the day so that they can claim it. Make sure you claim your space too. Make sure, like, if you don't have a production office, I put my Pelican right down on a table and people know that's office for the day. And yeah, it's, make sure everybody's comfortable, because I found once I walk into a venue, I don't stop working until I get into a hotel room or into my bunk. And that is a lot of being at front of house, being on stage, and not being backstage. So, you know, if hospitality isn't there yet, I find out what the ETA is. I'll get menus from the production if people want to order. Seamless has been, and Grubhub, that sort of thing has been great for emergencies if there's just nothing available at the moment or nobody wants to drive somewhere. Yeah, I always found it's get the band comfortable if they're going to be in the way while you're building the stage. Just keep them occupied, keep them comfortable so that you can do your job and get it done a lot faster. Nothing slows down a stage build more than an artist that wants to noodle.
Absolutely.
Or, you know,
I do. I
so,
do everything I can to keep them off the stage until my texts tell me that everything's ready for them to go.
yeah.
I have I don't know, I hope this is an interesting one. Everything happens so quickly when you walk into a venue, and I'm a person that I run off of structure and schedule, and it's very easy to, because when you first walk in, you're going to have a million different things coming at you, bouncing off of you. And it's super easy for all of a sudden for you to realize that your day is just kind of spinning out of control. Do any of you guys have any specific things that you do to kind of stop that process and to bring things back down to where they need to be to get yourself, you know, back checking those boxes off and making sure that everything's done?
I have an actual checklist.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so I will go through it and just sort of, if I feel like my day is insane all of a sudden, I'll just kind of refer back to that and just kind of go like, okay, well, all of these things have been done. Like, I need to take care of this, this, and this in the next half an hour.
Right.
And that's kind of how I sort of like bring things back.
Yep, same here.
I started using the reminders app on my iPhone a lot more than I ever have before. I used to use a notepad, but I find the reminders app, I have a shortcut where, you know, I have a widget and it's really easy to access. And sometimes I'll even just take a snapshot of that and make it the wallpaper on my phone. So it's really easy to see. I don't have to scroll through apps or whatnot. But yeah, it's, I try to stay as fluid as possible, just because, you know, I'm not working alone and there will always be somebody or something that gets in the way at some point. So I just try to be fluid. And if, you know, I prioritize the things that seem to be affecting people emotionally the most first. And, you know, just keeping an eye on when sound check's supposed to be done and when doors are and what time it is, and just constant time checks. And making sure the band has a time check too. Some bands don't like it, and you'll find out, and then you'll figure out a way around it. But if a band, you know, knows that, oh, we only have half hour left and we've just been messing about on stage, and the support who we love only gets a half hour sound check before doors, they'll snap into gear pretty quickly, I find.
Right.
I like to remind people when I walk in that I am doing two jobs. So, you know, I might be dealing with the promoter and the front of house is kind of harassing me, like for the updated input list. Like, you just have to prioritize, you know, and I think nobody takes it personally when you're like, you know, just give me 5 minutes, I'll be with you. It's just some people frankly don't realize how much work it is to do the two positions at once.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's something that we've honed in a lot on all three of these episodes, is that ability to be able to just be able to look at someone and be honest and say, it's not going to happen right now, but it will happen. I'll get to you. You know, it's not a failure, and it's not that you're not doing something right. It's just the reality of juggling. I think that we would be a lot better off if we were able to do that more often. What about you, Mary? You got anything?
I think when I'm faced with when the day is just like crazy for me, I just kind of, I don't know. I'll try and check myself, you know, like if it's somebody else who's actually kind of frustrated with something, I don't know why, but like I just go to the opposite end of the spectrum, like a seesaw, like I go in a different direction and just calm down. and try and take things like very slow and clear-minded to approach them and solve the problem. And then usually that brings the other person down as well to just figure it out and not get so frustrated, you know, because it is just something that comes up on the road, and we all have to deal with those things regardless of how much we plan or advance for them.
Let's say that you walk into a venue late and you need to, you know, just really quickly get your band on stage, or, you know, your day's just thrown completely askew. What are, at the very, very bare minimum, what are, you know, 3 things that you would prioritize to checking on before you're able to move on and really get like sound check started?
I personally will be up on stage helping unpack drums, you know, even if there's a backline tech and a key tech or whatever, whoever's on stage, hopefully you have like at least a backline tech and a monitor engineer, and I'll be hands-on with them. I'll deal with the sound after the fact. Thankfully, digital consoles allow us to do a bit of plug and play. Or I'll give my USB stick to the front of house, the house front of house, let him tell him which file to load, and then he can patch my outputs for me while I'm on stage helping. And I'll help patch mics, whether they're mine or somebody else's. I'll just be on stage until it's done, you know. And I find that, you know, sometimes say you have like a kind of like casual, slow kind of stage situation. If you start kind of hustling a little bit, people end up coming up to your pace. So
yeah, that's very, very true. When you are, you know, when you're comfortable with that point, if you're maybe not doing front of house and you're at a point that you're just able to tour manage and you get your band on stage, what are the things that you go and you check into at that point?
I would double check with the crew, make sure that they're all comfortable before I head out to any of my own priorities. Mainly that would be guest list to start, but also that's kind of like an open-ended task, because band will tell you maybe like 5 minutes after doors that there's an extra person they need to put on.
Of course.
But guest list will be first. I'll also send a reminder via a group text to everybody on the tour that, you know, guest list is due at this time. I set a time every day, which is usually about an hour before doors, just to give a little bit of a cushion. So guest list, make sure that merch has bank if they need it. Make sure that, you know, if there's any press, say like photo passes, that sort of thing, make sure that those are all in line. And, you know, that when the band's done and they come back to the dressing room, it's, you know, if hospitality hasn't arrived yet, chase that. And just being, and check ticket count. See if there have been any last minute tickets. So you kind of have an idea of what settlement will be like at the end of the evening.
I used to, you know, go in and sit with the promoter and just try and knock a lot of those things all out in a row as soon as I got the band on for sound check. You know, giving them what I had of the guest list, the preliminary guest list, you know, getting any meal buyouts, checking on those ticket counts. Like you can knock a lot of that out in one fell swoop by
going. And they'd also appreciate you not doing it 5 minutes before doors.
And in pieces, because they have just as many things going on too. You know,
exactly.
They're just as busy. One of the things that we haven't covered yet is I always also kind of go through and make sure that there are daily schedules hung up, you know, around the backstage area. Most of the time in a club, you know, theater scenario, the promoter rep will do that. But, you know, sometimes it's not done when you get there. And if I'm running short on time, it's definitely something I don't take the responsibility to do. I just say, I ask the promoter rep at that point, hey, can you guys print these while I'm getting everything set up over here?
There's also a lot of times you do want to run down the day of show as early as possible, because sometimes it doesn't match. And what's been advanced to you is not what the promoter rep has. It might be, the promoter rep might be somebody who works for the promotions company that did not actually do the advance with you. So, and that's happened a couple of times, you know, just dot your I's and cross your T's.
Have any of you guys ever run across a situation? I know I have that the advertised time versus the ticketed time versus the advanced time didn't match. It forced me to start adding and checking what the actual ticketed time is for the show. And the advertised time, that's one that, that's obviously a lot more wishy-washy, but the actual ticketed time that's on your ticket, that's legally binding. And it forced me to add that into my advance once I ran across that, so that I would not ever have to deal with that again, because I can get pretty sticky.
That's great advice. You mean like if they say doors 7, show at 8?
Yeah.
Situation? Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I feel like I've dealt a lot with that in Europe where,
yes,
it ends
absolutely.
up being show at 10:30 and I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the ticketed, whatever, was advertised when they bought the tickets is, doors at 7, show at 8. And then you go to advance it and they're like, oh, you guys aren't playing till 11. And I'm like, are there 17 opening bands? Like what, how is that a thing? And then, having to go and backtrack and figure out.
I feel like a lot of time that happens because maybe if ticket sales are a little weak, they want to have the bar open longer so that they can take in money at the bar. And I try to be reasonable about it. If it's a weekend night, it's, and you don't have a long drive the next day, I feel like it's, it's fine to push a little bit because you do want as many people in the room as possible. And it gives people time to get there. But, I've had some promoters really try to they'll push an hour, which is quite a lot. And then they'll push again. And at one point you just have to say, no, we've been sitting in this club for, 8 hours now, and we have a 9-hour drive tomorrow. And we're not going to get to the hotel at 2 a.m. at this point. So this is not, you have to stand your ground at some point. But I mean, it's not uncommon for promoters to try to push.
Yeah, it only makes sense that they're going to want to make more money, the most amount of money they can off of the bar before someone starts playing. And that it all kind of comes down to how much trust you have in the promoter that you're working with.
Yeah. I've also had it where when I'm doing an advance about a month or so out, I'll go to the venue website and they'll already have the time for doors and show there before we even discuss the daily schedule, which is something to keep in mind if you're advancing, because then you can just like nip that one in the butt to begin with and say like, no, we can't do doors at this time. We can't do the show at this time, But sometimes venues just go ahead and put their standard times up. And then by the time you approach that, it's too late to change the times.
Yep.
Yeah.
We actually just had somebody comment on Facebook, and this is a really good one. When, handling day of show in Europe, one of the things that I also ask first thing when I get there, hey, do you guys have a party that's going to start when our show's over? Are we going to be doing a disco loadout? Because, you want your crew to know that as much in advance as you can, because that's just the one thing that absolutely everyone hates.
Oh, for good reason.
Not to pick on New York is getting right there with the disco parties too.
Yeah. Discotheque. So that's also something, like I said, I ask that in my advance, when handling Europe, but I also make sure to double check that day of show when you get there, because, most of those places are nightclubs after the music show's over with.
Which makes a good point about double checking stage curfew and dressing room curfew as well. Yep. Because if, you have a bunch of, DJs coming into your dressing room at a certain time, you're going to want to make sure that you're all packed up and out of their way. But also, it's respectful. Here's one thing I've learned about touring is that you'll return to every club a lot. So you don't want to be that person. And you want to, when you return, you want them to be like, oh, hey, great to see you again, and not like, oh man, that person just didn't give a shit that we have a whole other party starting in an hour after their stage time.
Right.
So,
so sound check. prior to sound check, is there, I know, Dana, you kind of went into it a little bit of, handing over your USB drive to the local front of house. Do any of the rest of you have a process when you walk in and when you're, a checklist of things that you go through with the house, front of house and monitor engineer?
I tour with a lot of in-ears or like monitor rigs without an engineer. I know it's great.
Like, what?
Sorry?
Just when you said without an engineer, I went, what?
Oh, like if you have an X32 rack, and the band is operating it itself. It's magic.
Ideal.
Magic. So I want to make sure that that's set up properly. In an ideal world, if I just have like an in-ear rack, like the transmitters, hopefully the house monitor person can patch them in. I find that's kind of hit or miss. Some people won't do it or don't want to unpack stuff, their choice. And so I'd like to spend probably more time with the local monitor engineer and kind of give them the rundown of what the band will need, who's who, and what they should kind of keep an eye out for. I probably spend more time with them than the front of house, to be honest, because front of house can just, as Dana said, patch our outputs and kind of get going, hopefully.
Yeah. Have any of you guys ever gone into a situation not having a pre-built show file ahead of time?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of van tours you don't have the luxury of a pre-production day with the desk of your choice that's going to be in every venue. So first time out with the band, you're going to do a lot of programming on that first run. And I usually will let people know, like, this is, when I advance, I make sure to know what kind of desk there is within all the technical information. And I will let the rest of the tour know, just so you know, guys, it's a new desk for me, so I'm going to need this amount of time to program. If you need me, you know where to find me, but I need to build a show file today. And
you try to, when you're advancing all of that ahead of time, do you try to build in more time for yourself that day to be able to do that?
If you can, yeah, absolutely. But it's not always an option. The longer a venue's open, the more money it costs to do that. So, but I think once you get to a certain point, you can get pretty quick at building a file. And also, I had my first SSL desk, for example, last summer in Europe, and I've never used one before, and I never had my hands on one before. And I gave my input list to front of house, and while I was helping build the stage, and I said, "Hey, do you mind doing like starting on your start file, putting in the names on the channels?" And then I would come by and be like, "Oh, how did you do that? And I want to get some effects plugins happening. How do we do that?" I don't mind having my hand held a little bit if I don't know what's happening, because it's for the sake of time. You don't want to, you don't want anybody waiting on you ever. That's the goal, I feel like. So.
Absolutely.
I think like offline editors are a great tool, so we can prepare ahead of time sometimes, if you have that luxury of knowing with the desk and the version of the desk and things like that. But I think one note for venue techs, which is something that I honestly only see in about 50% of clubs, is having a good start file for guest engineers. Yeah. So, with your outputs patched and maybe like a couple choice effects, things like that, things laid out very simply. I was a house tech for quite some time, and that really helps me set something up for the guest engineer if they don't have something. I know Tiffany definitely has that at her club. She works with a desk that maybe is not as popular as other desks, so just having something to go quickly,
Trying to figure out how to phrase this question. Generally, do you have it pre-decided who's going to actually call the sound check, whether it's going to be monitors or front of house? Is that a discussion that you have ahead of time, or is that just something that you take on your own shoulders and say, front of house tour manager, I'm going to go ahead and call it? Because I've definitely seen it, both directions.
If I'm tour managing as well as front of house, I'll do that. you know, I'll take responsibility. But if I'm just front of house, I'll leave it up to the tour manager. I want them to be known as the authority figure of the tour.
Right. Gotcha. Tiff, you had something?
Yeah, I usually just ask the monitor engineer, because I'm almost always front of house, if they feel comfortable calling line check. And sometimes they will say, you can go ahead and do it. And sometimes they will be totally happy to do it.
Right.
I find like a lot of times, because the monitor engineer usually needs a little more time with each thing, that by the time they're done, that I'm dialed in out front. And if I need more time, I'll just ask.
That actually kind of leads into my next question. Have you guys ever had a situation where you were running front of house and, you know, the monitor engineer was maybe struggling that day, and that you actually left front of house and just go ahead and go to monitors to help out in any way you can?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a few too many times. If there is a monitor engineer and also a front of house person, I will, if I can't go, I will ask the house person to go, because they probably know the gear and the situation, you know?
Right.
And monitors is a really tough job. And I think that
it's a hot spot, man.
at a lot of clubs, that's your first position, you know?
Right.
And we've all been there. Like, God knows I've struggled through sound checks on monitors, but I think it's just important for the club to acknowledge that people need to be at a certain level, maybe to work with the national tour. You know, because it really, yeah.
I will make, if I'm relying on a house monitor engineer, I will make substantial notes about the mixes, the priorities. When I make a set list for them, it will have notes on every song. So at least if they don't know the music, which as a house engineer, I would try to listen to the bands before they arrived, so I was at least familiar if I didn't love them already.
Mm-hmm.
You know, say, oh, well, the guitar player picks up the blue guitar in this song, so you know which song you're on, this sort of thing. It's, you know, it can be tough because I've had to go and like re-ring out monitors sometimes. And it's a really delicate procedure, so that you don't want to step on people's toes, and you also don't want somebody's fragile ego to be like, no, you know, you don't know, like, you know, what our boxes sound like.
Well, you don't know what my band likes, so.
Yeah. I mean, I just try to be really gentle about it, but yeah, it's
definitely a very delicate balance.
As a person who's spent a lot of time on house monitors, like, I really don't mind if you come up to me and you say, hey, like, please pull a little bit of 500 and something like that. But, you know, again, phrasing, like, don't tell me, oh, you can't hear that 160.
Yeah.
You know, like, that doesn't make me want to help you, you know? But I will obviously default to the front of house if they're like, you know what, the singer really hates 4K, just pull it all out. Okay, cool. You know, you tour with them. You probably know. I'm just the house person today, you know?
Yeah. Set list. I know myself, I have a Dropbox full of probably 1,000 set lists. I keep track of all of them on, you know, whatever tour it is, whatever different kind of cloud service that everyone prefers to use. I learned my lessons about SoundList in a very, very unique situation. The first time that I ever, you know, the set list was something that was a huge part of my responsibility is when I toured with Metallica. And Metallica has a incredibly complex version of their set list. They don't ever want to play the same set in a city twice. They don't want to play the same order of songs. They don't want to do ever the same set list that they did in the last show that they did. So everything is kept in incredibly well-designed databases, and there are reports that are run that you sit down with the band, and there's a time calculator that's used so that you can figure out to the minute, to the second, exactly, you know, what that set's going to end up. It's pretty genius. However, in light of not doing that for a few years, I am very, very happy to go back to the normal, hey, here's what you did in the last city. What song do you want to take out and what do you want to replace? Where in the day do you start the process with your artist on the set list? Because I know that, some artists are incredibly specific about it and want a lot of time to think about it. And some artists will write it down on a cocktail napkin and go, yeah, this is cool, whatever, type it up. So do you start that process yourself, like right after sound check, or is it something that you put their, a bug in their ear when you get to the venue and you get them to the dressing room? Max, I saw you laughing about this one. What's your thoughts?
I think it depends who you're out with. So, I feel like there's two camps. So I work with a lot of people who it's maybe the same set for the whole tour. Maybe if there's a lot of tracks involved in, resetting up an Ableton session or something. So there is not that much room for leeway. So that is usually, I'm like, oh, is this the set for the tour? And they're like, yeah, and maybe halfway something will change, but it's very minimal. And then you have the people who, don't want to play the same set, want to vary it up, but don't want to commit until 20 minutes before set time. Won't name any names. And so for those people, I definitely become the annoying tour manager. And I probably bug them way too much. But, when we get in, I'm like, hey, did we think about set lists for tonight? Maybe something, it's, you have to be a little flexible, unfortunately, with that stuff, and I mean, at least in my case with smaller club tours, like, no one is going to die if the set list is decided 50 minutes beforehand. There isn't that many notes for the house staff. So I just try to roll with it.
You have to know how to be flexible, and you also know how to manage your own anxiety.
I would say on the other end, for bigger productions, a lot of times say, if a guitar tech has to program, reorder the whole MIDI foot pedal situation, they'll need time for that. I've been on a tour, I was doing monitors, and literally during the support band, because the set list wasn't done on time, he was on stage under some duve programming the pedal boards while the support band was on stage. Your crew will let you know what they need, like how much time they need. And, you just have to make sure that the artists understand it's for their benefit, so that, their tech can get a dinner and be well rested for their 1.5-hour set, 2-hour set, whatever the case is. But also that there's no mistakes. A lot of this, I use, like when I do monitors, I'll use a lot of snapshots, and to reorder that can take some time. So, and you don't want to trigger the wrong song, which I did once. So yeah.
It's also really important, to keep all of those prior set lists in some kind of a cloud service. So when they're walking off stage and you go, hey, have you thought about set lists for tonight? And they go, yeah, let's do the same one we did in San Francisco. And you're like, that was 3 weeks ago. Oh. That way you can just pull it up and, change whatever info on it that you need to change at the top, city, where you're at.
And if in case you don't have that, or you say you're joining the tour after, like in the second run of that album cycle, and you were not on the first run, there is a website that actually fans will upload set lists.
Last.fm.
So, yep. And you can always double check that in a hurry.
I've also found Wikipedia to be an incredible, believe it or not, most artists, it'll have a list of their previous tours, and you can pop onto North America, whatever, and it'll have a list. Really surprised me. But if you can't find it on Last.fm, which is always my first go-to, you can try Wikipedia as a backup. Yeah. The importance of traveling with a printer. Let's talk about that. Mary, what's your favorite printer to take on tour with you?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, Misty. My favorite model, and I don't have a sponsorship with them, is a Pixma. A Pixma printer.
The old Canon.
And it's delicious. I love it.
Yeah. I actually recently, I've switched sides. I've used Canon, Pixma. My first one was the I-80, and it was like this weird gold color. I don't even know if anyone remembers because that's how long ago it was. And I just got to the point that I got really, really tired of having weird printer head issues with it. And I found a really small portable HP. I couldn't tell you the name of it right now because I don't have it with me, but it's actually lasted me a solid year, and I'm kind of back in it right now. Dana, I do see that you have your Pelican case.
With a
We
printer
talked about
inside.
this. Yeah, we talked about this last week, how we were going to have Dana give us a tour of her Pelican case.
We can do it at the end or whenever is appropriate.
You know, I say we go ahead and do it now because it very much ties into that part of the day, popping open your Pelican and everything you needing to have being in there. So
Cool.
nope.
Okay. I'll show you guys. So I upgraded my Pelican and my printer and everything at the beginning of this year, which in hindsight was a horrible decision. Of course, we didn't have hindsight back then. So Pelicans are great. The 1510 or the Pelican Air 1535. You can carry on flights. You can check them. Nothing will get destroyed. I have a lid organizer in here, which a lot of people like to use. Very handy, and I have it divided by sections, and then the base of it is here. Let me know if you guys can't see anything, but let's see. So I have in here is what I need basically for my day. The only thing I don't carry with me unless I have on a bigger tour and there's a proper work box for a production office is paper. I always make sure that the production promoter knows that I need, you know, maybe like a quarter ream of paper. So that's there for sound check. So what do I have in here? I have a label maker. You may not know if you need to label anything, but I guarantee you will label something if you have a label maker with you. I swear to God, it works every time. I have a router. If I'm doing monitors from front of house, I will have the router. I have a Cat5 cable in here. And that means I can control monitors from my iPad if I have to be up on stage to get a good monitor mix. I have the printer underneath that, this is a printer. I use the plug-in power. I don't have the battery for it yet. And then just underneath there's space for extra cartridges. But yeah, these things, you don't realize how much you have to print until you don't have a printer. And there will be, it used to be, well, we were printing SoundScan all the time to start with every night. And sometimes maybe some contracts or paperwork will come that people need to sign. It's good to have. You're on a bus, you can even just plop it on the table and print from anywhere. It's great. I have my locking cash bag so that, but it's locked. The key stays on my neck, 24/7. That's really important. I've had cash stolen out of dressing rooms before. And it's to the point now where I will take my Pelican up to front of house with me because as good as security can be, it may not be great. Somebody might sneak back. The talkback mic for front of house with a switch, really important. Various envelopes for receipts. You'll figure out how much you need. Sometimes a folding file folder is good. Let's see, up here, I carry e-tape, which you always need. Console tape sometimes, but with digital consoles, you don't need them as much. Rechargeable batteries, really helpful in a pinch, especially if you have in-ears. If you have a huge rack, hopefully you'll have a built-in rechargeable battery rack. And let's see, got passport, global entry, phone holder if you're driving for GPS. This is like the travel section. Luggage scale, always helpful, especially if you have fly dates. I carry a bunch of TSA locks. I always have extra ones just in case. If you fly, you will know that TSA doesn't always lock these back up and they'll fall off your case. So I always have extras. USB key for, say, plugins. I have a USB 2 and a USB-C. Earplugs, highly recommend that for everybody on tour all the time. This is just a shitload of Sharpies and pens. And then I always carry a corkscrew because I always forget to put one in the dressing room and somebody's gonna want some wine. The most important part, I have my coffee maker, my coffee grinder, and my coffee beans. I highly recommend. This is the AeroPress Travel. Super easy. It's just put the coffee beans in and in there with a filter, and you press, and you have a really beautiful espresso or coffee like in 2 minutes. So, and also it's really nice to have this, and you can make coffee for your crew and your band, and people really like it. So, and then you can get coffee beans on your rider. I get the beans and I grind them myself. You can get like these little portable grinders for $12. So that's everything I carry. And then usually there's also a Leatherman, but I made the mistake of letting a musician borrow it and they lost it. So that's not there. And then you find out what you need throughout the day and you can add, and there's always room. And they're completely customizable with pick and pluck foam. Yeah. I see we lost Misty. So what else would you put in here? Let's say Max or Mary or Tiff?
Misty, where did you go? That is some incredible stuff. I really, other things I would add is alcohol swabs. Even in pre-COVID times, if by chance you are using house mics, they might smell like shawarma. Don't use house vocal mics ever. But also, I tour with a lot of people who wear lipstick, so it's good to wipe off their mic every night so it doesn't get caked on. I would add medical tape, like the kind of tape that you get, if you get an IV put on your arm. It can be good to stick the back on the back of in-ears if you have a musician that loses their ears during the show a lot. And I also always carry a spare, like a generic pair of in-ears with me with disposable tips.
The foam ones, right?
Yeah, everybody's been on tour where your singer's ears break, and even if you can get some in 2 days, they need to get through the show. And I mean, if you are with people on ears, also having the cable for the manufacturer with
having
you,
spares,
The artist should hopefully have some, but in a perfect world.
Do you have I have this that is like my production in front of house, but then I also have a Pelican for stage, say with like my package in it. It's like, do you divide up any things, or do you try to just keep everything on you at all times?
I'm a backpack and case kind of person. So my backpack, I would say, is my office, and the Pelican is the audio store. So my backpack is always with me. That would be where the important documents are. And I mean, as you said, hopefully the green room is secure, but you never know. So I also always offer, like, to my band, if you want to give me your wallet or something, I can keep it in my backpack for the show.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've definitely been to some smaller venues where it just doesn't, like we talked about last week as well, maybe the support band decides to camp out in your dressing room during the show. You don't want them to have access to your laptop and keys and whatnot. So what's like the craziest thing that you realize that you need on every tour? Huh?
Well, I'm sorry. I think we stepped over each other.
Yeah, no,
I was just gonna add on, Max. I also pack a scanner, like these little tiny long scanners you can have now, because as good as the apps are on your phone, sometimes they just don't cut it. Or I'll pack a laminator too. They have them thin these days as well, which comes in handy because certain requests for like weird dressing room names or like more arrows needed, like always comes up for you to just put on there. But yeah, I think you covered a lot of it, Dana. Like the coffee thing was genius.
It's like, This was my first. I've always wanted to carry the coffee, but this was my first year I did it, and man, it's so helpful, especially when you don't want to deal with those really crappy coffee packets in hotel rooms that just taste like brown water. You know, I wouldn't say I'm a coffee snob, but having a good coffee first thing in the morning, or like when, say, after a long sound check, when you really need like to kick into second gear, it's helpful. The AeroPress Travel Go thing is so super. Highly recommended. And now I have nowhere to bring this thing. All this stuff. And now it's sitting in my closet for like the next year, which is, you know,
Yeah.
I'll write it off on my taxes, but it's when you do have everything that you need, it's just so much easier, you know?
I've made use of my label maker by labeling my spice rack.
I said you'll find stuff to label. I mean, you know, people will want to label all their stuff, you know? Luggage tags are really great. If you're starting off on a tour and you have bag tags, and usually you'll have a number on one side, and you'll have the, you know, if found, please return to address on the other side. But sometimes you want to put like labels on, say if you have a big crew, their suitcases, but so that they go up to the right rooms when you get to a hotel, for example, or on their passports. If you're crossing a border or doing a fly day, you have everybody's passports. You don't have to open them up when you get the ticket, and make sure, you know, it just label their name on the back with their last name. It's helpful. It just helps speed things up, and you'll be surprised at how much time and energy you save, just for consistency's sake. Did we lose Misty again? She looks very contemplative. I think we might have lost Misty again.
Might be. She's having trouble with her internet. I know that.
Okay, well, let's look at the document, because we have that doc that we're going to talk about. So Tiffany. Oh no, Mary. Mary, let's talk about merch.
Cool. All right, so merchandise. So we kind of touched on it a little earlier. Basically, if you have the luxury to have somebody else on your team do merch, you kind of want to put in your advance certain things for the merch person, like contacts for that person at the venue, a time for you to for them to meet with the venue contact, as well as just like what amenities the venues might have, tables, racks, chairs, lighting, power, all that kind of stuff. And just help them out where you can, like give them one person to help at load in, like a hand to help them load in all their stuff, and then somebody at the end of the night to go help them load out. Because really that's almost its own separate department where it doesn't see the rest for the whole day. So if you can help them out a little bit here and there, that's always appreciated. Although sometimes it can get neglected or fall kind of to the lower bottom of the food chain when it comes to priorities, it just kind of is how it is. But if you have to be the person who has to check in the merch and count it all in with the venue, sometimes you can go ahead and talk to them about it. If you want to submit like numbers, price list sheets, all that kind of stuff ahead of time, that's always helpful for the venue. And the person selling, always provide a bank, just fives and ones, about $100. And if you can give them like a pouch to keep it all in, that's always really helpful too. Just as if you can make the job as like well contained as possible without having like that venue person having to not bother you, but like need your help throughout the day when you have so many other things to do as either a TM front of house or what have you. That's kind of key to doing the merch position, in my opinion.
And at the end of the night, when merch is counted out and they have cash on them, do you, when you TM, are you holding on to the cash? Are you making them 100% responsible for the cash? How do you handle that?
Usually, if it's somebody else on my team, they will give me an envelope with the cash. They'll give me either the name of the venue or the city we're in on the envelope and the amount of money that was earned. And then they'll send me a settlement of the merch. And usually they'll send that to the merch manager, or they'll send that to me, they'll send that to themselves, they'll send that to the business manager as well as the band manager, and sometimes the artists themselves. It just depends. But usually either way you slice it, like the tour manager gets the money at the end of the night, because we're responsible for if the money goes missing and depositing the money sometimes, you know.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I would say, I mean, that's what I do. What about you ladies? Max, you as a TM, you take care of, like, you're responsible for all the money. So you always have it on you. Yeah.
Yes, I want all the money. The only exception that I would make is I would maybe leave a float with the merch seller. Like if I have a merch seller on tour with me, I'll usually leave them with at most $100. And what we'll do is we'll change it out every day if they start running out of smaller bills, depending on the price point of the items. I think also one thing that I forgot to mention that I do keep in my Pelican is an extra, like I use Square a lot with artists.
I was
and
going to ask,
the
yes.
small readers are very cheap. So I personally own one because I've had, you know, people lose the reader or there be issues. You know, I know that in a big pro merch setup, people use like competing, I don't even know, what would you call it? Like the device, the payment device. But yeah, I mean, for $5, I'm going to keep one in my bag just in case we need it. Yeah.
And then Tiff, for like from the house side, what advice would you have to make, you know, the merch process easier than, like, as easy as it can be? Because I know nobody really likes dealing with it. It can be tedious. If you're counting in and out and you're getting different numbers from the person that you're counting with, maybe, like, how do you handle that?
When I started working at the pageant, I actually did merch there for 2 years.
So, you know.
And I have some insight. The worst days I had were the days that they would use house sellers and like that person wouldn't necessarily put everything away properly. Like I had one day where I came in, happened to be there a little early, and so they asked me to like clock in and jump on sorting out like 25 boxes of t-shirts that had just been like over and over again at the end of the night, like different people putting things in different ways and different quantities, because everybody, I mean, it's pretty standard to like fold t-shirts in 12s, lay those flat, and anything smaller than that gets folded in half, or that's what I've always done and I've always seen. That makes it definitely easy. If you're on tour, like definitely like making sure that your stuff stays organized as much as possible. And I've been the person that has to deal with that at the end of the night, like as a tour manager, and it's not always easy to do because there are any number of things that happen. Okay. So yeah, I mean, if you can just like put a little bit of time and effort into organizing, making sure that your boxes are organized, that your men's t-shirts and your women's t-shirts or your women's and your unisex are separated, because that's always like a weird thing. And that you bring me a bank, and signage actually is really helpful as well.
I would, yeah, I would always get a receipt for any cash I'm giving to anybody for sure on the tour, or if it's a house seller. I'd also make, you know, I find that these days most people are using a Square reader or a credit card scanner more so than cash. So I will make sure, you know, I'll make sure that they know how to use the device, that there's Wi-Fi available there. And I'll also make sure that prices are, I'll go down to prices, even though they're written out. Like I'll make a sheet for them that shows the prices. And even though they're written out, just make sure they understand, like, this is the same design on the shirt, but these are long sleeve and they're $15 more than this shirt, you know, not to baby anybody, but you know, it's, if you're personable enough, you can do it without hurting any feelings, and just make sure that it's completely understood that, you know, that these are the prices that they're responsible for. What about
something that I've also always had to do is, you know, like if you're traveling into a different country and you need a bank, you know, ask the promoter ahead of time, maybe to have $100 for you in that currency, you know, because it's not, you're not going to have time in the Czech Republic Czech Republic's not it is an example, but yeah, just getting the currency of the country. Yeah.
And if you're in Europe, make sure that you have not just an envelope for bills, but there's a lot of coins overseas. You know, if you're in England, you're going to get a lot of pound coins, and we call it shrapnel because it's just a ton of metal in your pocket. So yeah, I would say I would have like a different, if I'm dealing with a multi-currency tour, I would also have different envelopes for different currencies, because I don't want to bring a whole bunch of American dollars into a venue in Canada, or not, well, actually they take American in Canada sometimes. Say if you're, you know, just flying all over the place, you do want to keep it separate. It on the sheet that I sent out, that Carrie sent out, I would make another column for another currency so that you can keep track of all that. And then what about settling merch at the end of the night? I know it's very common practice now for venues to take a percentage. Say, I know I've been on some tours where maybe the merch wasn't as great of a sell that night. And have you guys ever tried to talk out of, you know, any percentage on hard or soft goods?
I'd say yeah, for sure. Especially if you're a support band and you're not really bringing in as much money as the headliner, or if it was a surprise right when you get to the venue that like the contract changed from what you had initially in what the booking agent gave you or what you heard from the headliner. You can probably try and finagle your way out of having to pay if you're support for the fee. Headliner, it's a little more tricky, but sometimes you can wiggle your way down in the percentage, but not usually get out of it.
Right. Also, good point. Like if you're support and you're with a headliner, have you guys ever had a headliner insist that you price match your merch?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've not, but I've seen it a couple of times. It never works out well for the support act at all.
No.
Yeah, I mean, you should check in with your with the headliner before. I mean, that's been standard for me on any support tour I've done, and for sure it doesn't benefit my artist. One workaround that sometimes I've had allowed is allowing merch bundles for my artist. So for example, if we're price matching a t-shirt for $35, which is like, you know, a standard kind of theater price, maybe they'll let me for $40 do a t-shirt and an LP.
That's a good point.
Not that much of a deal, but I mean, when you put an LP at $20 or whatever, and yeah, so.
And then I guess the last thing about merch would be doing merch at a festival. I feel like if you're kind of middle to lower on the bill, I would like to point out it takes a hell of a lot of time to get merch in and out of the merch booth at a festival. The merch booth is usually very far away from everything else that's relevant to your day. Usually you can't sell, you know, you have to have the festival sell for you. And they take a super high percentage. So would you talk your artists out of selling merch at a festival ever?
I wouldn't. Tiff, I'm gonna go after you.
Okay, cool. I've had it be a discussion a couple times with management. That's never really like a thing that the artist wants to talk to me about, and not something I want to talk to them about most of the time either. But it's usually gone about 50-50. And it kind of depends on where we are in the billing. I've done a lot of Pride festivals, and I started out doing those, like taking just like a box of merch, and they wouldn't sell. So after the first week, we just wound up axing merch entirely, except for, I think we did like Milwaukee Pride, but then we didn't even, and I think she headlined Milwaukee Pride that year. And we didn't make enough money on merch to have it been worth it. So we'll do it occasionally, but in my experience, I'm not usually with like a big festival headliner, you know, where they're going to make a lot.
Right.
I'm usually on those like before 4 p.m., you know, on the stage sort of people. So.
Got you.
Next.
I mean, you're gonna have to, in those cases, for sure, price match the headliner. So I think it's a good conversation to have with the manager. Like, I can think of one instance where I was out with a band who opened for a very large band, and I think the audience was like, I think there was no joke, 50,000 people there. And so the manager sent us off with like 6 boxes of t-shirts. And when we got to the merch booth, the people laughed at us, like the local sellers, and basically accepted 1 box and said, we'll call you if we need more. And I mean, that's very much true. Again, nobody's gonna wanna buy the baby band's t-shirt for $60. But in that case, the headliner didn't have an LP, like a physical record. And so the artist did sell records. So maybe if you can find out what they don't have and maybe bring that. But I mean, I'd be surprised if you sold more than 10 t-shirts, you know?
I would also look at the profit margin. Festivals tend to charge a higher percentage on soft and hard goods than a typical house venue show. And yeah, say if you are a baby band and you don't want to sell, you know, if you don't have to price match, you still will make like less than cost, depending on what your price is and how much the venue's going to take. If you sell like 2 shirts, and considering it takes up so much time. If the merch will be by more towards the entrance of the festival, dressing rooms will be back by whatever stage perhaps. And the merch, head of merch may be counting out 12 other bands before you. So take every day as a grain of salt when it comes to festivals. But yeah, know that I mean, I've done it in the past where we've just said, you know what, let's not deal with the merch. It's not worth it. We're not going to make any money. You know, even if you sell something, you'll make, you know, $2 instead of 10. So it's totally acceptable to nix it for a festival day if you have to.
Yeah, I'd say sometimes it's really difficult to get that through to a band, especially if they're on a tour and they're doing so well with their own merch, and then they have a festival date. They just get not cocky, but they just get confident that they're still going to sell a lot of merch at a festival, and trying to bring them back down to reality that the festival isn't about them. That's always a hard thing to overcome, especially when some bands, just like Max said, they want to bring so much merch in, you know?
Hi, Misty. Welcome back. We were just talking about festival merch. We talked about house merch and how festival merch can be kind of wonky at times. But yeah, everybody made some great points. Do you want to pick it up, Misty, after the merch discussion? I feel like we covered all the merch stuff, right, guys?
Oh yeah, we get to talk about guest list now.
Guest list. Oh, guest list. I decided a couple years ago to make my life a lot easier and just give in, and I use Master Tour for my guest list. I build it before, you know, the tour, obviously, along with everything else that I'm building. And Master Tour actually has a really great system set up because you can actually tie your guest list portion of it. You know, if you're on a larger tour, you can tie it into ticket buys and sending out invitations for ticket buys and things like that. You can also set up exactly what level of passes that you want. You can preload it with the passes, you know, that you and your security folks have agreed on. And it prints off all kinds of fantastic reports, and it tells you exactly how many tickets you have left and what you're working with. So that's what I utilize. And I can actually, you know, having a Master Tour Pro, I'm able to use it on my phone so that if someone catches me in the hallway and says, oh, hey, I need to add so-and-so to Milwaukee, you know, you can do it right there on the spot. It also gives you the ability to tell people when their requests have been approved, if those tickets have been approved or not. So that's the way that I track it. Prior to that, I just use the, you know, good old spreadsheet with a million tabs at the bottom for every city, and, you know, pop them in as you get them. I myself have, I do a noon day of show cutoff, but I'm also often working on a much, much larger scale. So what do you guys do? I mean, when when I was doing van and trailer, it was, I would send everybody like a group text about 10 minutes before I turned it in and said, hey, anything to add before I turn this in? I mean, you're always going to have the after doors last minute, oh, hey, so-and-so just texted me. And, there will always be those things you have to figure out. But what kind of a timeline do you guys work with?
I do about an hour to 30 minutes before doors, and I'll try, you have a couple special people on your team that might need a little bit more cushioning, so it's good to gauge them and maybe put a placeholder on the guest list if you can, but that's usually what I do.
Yeah.
I'll actually put the deadline for the guest list in the master tour schedule so that people see it. It triggers a memory because, and it helps me to remember to turn it in as well. So
it's a really good idea.
Thank you.
I try to not find out necessarily, but if like our venue, the box office opens an hour before doors, and those people who are supposed to be on the guest list more often than not are showing up at 6 o'clock asking where their tickets are and are usually not happy to be told they have to wait an hour. So I try to get it in an hour before doors, and I try to let the band know. I mean, I just, same as everybody, just continue to tell them over and over and over again, hey, the guest list is due at 6 o'clock.
Yeah. We've all probably come up with a situation too that we've had more guest list requests than we have spots, which can be very delicate balance. Obviously, it's good to always try and accommodate for your band the best that you can, but you're going to run into situations that you can't. It's always much easier, obviously, if it's a show that's sold well, because then your promoter is definitely a little bit more willing to work with you and giving you some extra spots. How do you guys prioritize, I guess, when it comes to you don't have enough guest list tickets? I mean, I know generally the easiest way to prioritize is by who sent what when, the last minute request or the lowest on the priority list. Do any of you guys have any other ways of breaking that news to your band folks if they can't have someone?
I try to avoid having that conversation. If I know it's going to be, say if it's a hometown show for the band, I will make sure I have their significant others' names and make sure that they are crew for the night. Because usually they will also be the ones that they will want to have all access anyway. If I'm on a laminate tour, I have spare laminates always. They're numbered. I know who gets what number, and I make sure I get that back. Or else, I've never had to do the laminate of shame. Do you guys know about the laminate of shame?
Oh, I do.
Misty, yeah. Area. The laminate of shame, most laminates are about yay big. The laminate of shame is about yay big on a lanyard. And the person who loses their laminate or loses their guest laminate has to wear the laminate of shame. I mean,
have you ever had any problems when asking for those laminates back? I know I have. Everybody wants to keep that laminate, and
I've been okay. I mean, I've been lucky that people have been respectful.
That's good. I've actually had to have conversations with the band folks themselves and have to explain it, that they're like, well, that's really tacky that we asked for them back. I'm like, that laminate costs $2.50.
And it's security.
Yeah. Do you want to keep adding those up? I can keep track of them throughout the tour of how many you use. If you want us to just, you want to write a check at the end. Because they get expensive, and you're right. There's the security aspect of it, which every day is becoming more and more important.
Oh yeah.
And it doesn't always, that laminate doesn't always go to a trusted source. So, it's important to ask for them back.
You weren't online when I was showing the Pelican, but I mentioned that I had cash stolen out of the dressing room because somebody gave a sticky to somebody else. I was like, oh, well, you can just have the sticky, as a friend of a friend. And we suspect that that's the person that took it because nobody really knew who this person was. And they disappeared before the end of the show. So, I mean, security is everything. Which I guess also will tie into like when you do guest lists. When I go into a venue, when I hand in a guest list, I will talk to the band and see what they're comfortable with. Some bands need like their quiet time before the show, but some bands want to see all their friends beforehand. Maybe it's a small club where they just do wristbands, and those, you'll discuss if you can escort with a wristband, for example. That's something that I will make sure to touch base on. You don't want to decide that on the fly and disappoint somebody or piss somebody off.
I've also, in larger markets, New York, LA, I've done situations where I have different colored wristbands, pre-show and post-show. And, those can be escorted back. That way you're not overwhelming sometimes those very, very tiny, small backstage spaces. One of the other things I want to talk about too is those large markets, because obviously we all know that those large markets have a lot bigger guest list. That's something that I've always tried to keep on top of ahead of time, talking to the agent ahead of time, like, figuring out, I've had a lot of success, when you're in a market like that and you're signed to Island Def Jam and 25 people want to come out. Let's figure out how to do a ticket buy for the record label so that doesn't come out of our guest list allotment. And that's something that I learned very, very early on, and it's actually worked all the way, no matter what level of touring I've been at throughout my career. William Morris and CAA, they have a lot of money. They can afford to do a ticket buy. They know the level that your band is on, and they know the contract that's been signed and what your guest list allotment is. So I've definitely had to do a little bit of pushback here and there at times to go, wait, you signed this contract that says we get 10 guest list tickets in LA. And now you're asking me for 15 guest list tickets. Where's the something's not matching up here. So, do you guys have any other ways that you navigate around those larger markets and trying to stay on top of it ahead of time?
I mean, I ask also how many spots the agent has, because a lot of times agents have their own lists, and if you're in a support slot, chances are you're the same agency as the headliner. So if I can, I will pass some of my names on to them, and your mileage may vary, but I gave in a very large guest list last time I was in LA, and I just basically told the promoter rep, I'm like, they're literally all going to leave the minute the headliner goes on. And they let it fly, because it was true. They were just there to see my artist and then leave.
A lot of times, in situations like that, the promoter reps get that. They know. They work in a market like that. They know what to expect that day. I would like to say that I've had scenarios where I've tried to like charm them into helping me, but they're reality based, just like we are. So if you explain it in a realistic manner like that, likely they're gonna get it.
I've always run into.
I'd also say, like, in my experience, sometimes I'll have a promoter rep email me and have a name on the list, and then I'll find out they're already on the headliners list, or they come to the support band before going to the headliner when they're, repping the same band, which is really weird. So I'd always check for like double names on both lists, as well as if like it's a friend of the booking agent or the promoter or something, maybe they can the headliner can take care of them instead of the support band.
Oftentimes they're going to have a lot more leeway, a lot more flexibility.
I've also had situations where I've had press people contact the support band so they can get in and, have a photo pass for the headliner too. I'm pretty, strict about it. I'm kind about it because, if you do want good press, but I do make sure that, that they do cover the band that they got the guest list spot from and the photo pass spot from. Super important. It's a little shady, but it happens.
It does. People will get super duper shady when it comes to guest list. When it's just as easy to buy a ticket, really.
or just tell the venue, because sometimes they can help you out.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you guys covered merch while I was having my internet outage, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
So let's go through times that you want to give the band heads up. So I always want to make sure, that I let the band know the doors have opened so that they don't go out wandering out into the audience. Very important to let them know that there are people in the building. And I myself go a little bit deeper on the, I started about 45 minutes before they're supposed to go on stage. Primarily, a lot of the tours that I do now are very wardrobe heavy and have, backup singers, makeup, hair, et cetera, et cetera. So I start way earlier. When I was, smaller theaters and things like that, I would give like a 10-minute heads up. But now I find that I have to make sure that everyone has the appropriate time to put their face on and make sure that their wardrobe isn't going to split open on stage or whatever. When do you guys start? When do you start letting the band know? Tiffany.
I try to give them a heads up when, like, an hour out, maybe when the opening act goes on. I'll just let them know, like, hey, the show started. And it kind of depends on the band, because I've had some bands who I have to remind every 10 minutes that they're doing a show tonight. And then I have some bands that are absolutely like, I'm doing a show in 10 minutes. So it just kind of depends.
Yeah.
I try not to be too like a babysitter about it, because I find that some people that I have worked with get a little weird about it if you just continue to tell them what time it is. But yeah, I usually kind of give them like a heads up, like, hey, the opener's on. Hey, the opener comes off in 10 minutes or something, or 5 minutes. Just whatever they sort of need, because when the opener comes off, like, it's go time.
Yeah. I love that you say that you try to make that effort to not come off, harping at them every 5 minutes. I've worked with bands that's what you have to do, and it's difficult because you definitely then get kind of viewed as like the babysitter. But it's definitely a necessity. I mean, you will always have that one guy who waits until you say, we're walking. Oh, I have to go to the bathroom. I've been in here for 10 minutes telling you you've got 10 minutes. So, the importance of that maneuvering around and getting to know their exact habits is really important. I've definitely worked with people that I would go in 10 minutes and say, in 3 minutes, I need you to go to the bathroom. Because I actually had to tell them, I need you to use the restroom now, instead of that running to the stage at the very last minute. Do you guys like to have your band at the stage at any certain time?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the points that we haven't really talked about is how hard it is to tour manage from front of house when you have to be at the sound console and the band has to get up on stage. And I will often, it depends on the band. Some bands are self-sufficient, some bands need their handheld. And that's when I'll rely on the promoter rep a bit. And I'll ask them, I'll make sure that everybody in the band knows who is helping them out. And I'll arrange for them to bring them to the stage at a certain time if that particular band needs it. I'll make a big deal about it. Support band last song, changeover is starting in 2 minutes. All right, it's crew ready? Let's go crew. And then, just kind of make it to nobody in particular, but people will know it's getting close to showtime. And then make sure that the promoter is there and standing by. I will do it, once you make sure the stage is good, I will wish everybody a good show, try to start it off positively. Does anybody need anything? Okay, I'm at front of house. You guys have a great show. I'll see you after the show's done. And then the promoter will help get the band on stage.
Max, earlier you talked about in-ears. Do you have a preference whether you like to take the in-ears to the dressing room and have them, clip in and get suited up there, or do you prefer to do it with them, side of the stage right before they walk on?
I always bring the packs to the green room. I personally like to change the batteries myself. It's not that I don't trust the local engineer, but it's part of my day. And then I know that all my packs are in the green room. I'll tell people where they are. And when I come back to the green room for my last, I'll be ready to go. I'll make sure that everybody has indeed taken their pack. And if they've forgotten where I put them, I let them know again. But yes, I like to be part of that process. And then, I also, if you have elaborate outfits, I will sometimes help put them on. If I'm working with a lot of women I work for, if I will put it in their bra myself.
Do any of you guys have a short checklist that's these are the last things I need to take care of, and then I'm headed to front of house?
I just check water, set list, towels. If I'm working with a house engineer, I will check all the monitors really quick, at least vocals, if there's any issues, if there were issues during sound check. And I will try to do a tap through with either my backline or with the house staff.
Anybody else?
I want to check my tracks for sure. I'm a big fan of line check. I always tell my artists that it's not really negotiable for me. Even if, there wasn't much of a changeover or something, I want to go through the lines.
I want to tour with you.
I try and make sure that people that are maybe really reliant on the tracks have their ears in, and they can, just take a listen and make sure that we're in a good place to start the show. I also, alcohol, if anybody needs a last minute drink, I am a great bartender, and I will run to the bar and be your waitress as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, my general checklist is just that rundown of, on the radio, making sure that the stage is completely ready, that on giant level, that, every department has called in show ready. And same thing, always just making sure everybody's got their water, their black hand towels, set list tape down where they need to be. So now you would think, after all of this that you've gone through all day long, and your artist is on stage and they're doing a show, and it's over, and wouldn't it be super cool if you could just leave? There's a whole nother half of the day left after the show's over.
Oh my God. Well, if
right?
you have 2 shows in a row, that's kind of a little bit of a...
Yeah, you get to do a walk away.
I do love a residency.
I love nothing more than a walk away mid-tour, when you're Chicago or whatever, and you're like, 2 sold out shows. Awesome. We get to just walk right off the stage and just leave.
Yeah.
Sell it.
So
but that's not normally what happens. So I myself usually take my band as soon as they walk off stage, and I walk them to the dressing room. And I, at that point, start to kind of try to ensure that, whoever their after show guests are not having problems getting back to where we're going. Because nothing will hang up, load out quicker than my girlfriend can't get backstage. So that's the first thing I take care of. What's the first thing that you guys take care of?
I always check with the band before I let the guests come backstage, to make sure that they have time to wipe the sweat off their brow and, reapply their lips or whatever they have to do. Just make sure they're comfortable and that they have the drinks that they have. And then I think I touched on this with hospitality. If I determine that there will be guest hospitality coming in later, like the PBR, the cheap case of beer, I'll make sure that that promoter knows that that should be stocked and ready to go before the band's off the stage. But yeah, check with the band first, make sure they're comfortable and we can allow guests. And if there's quite a bit of guests, you know, I will have talked with security beforehand and say, where's the holding area? And, you know, no, remind them no escorting or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'll do that, and I'll also make sure, you know, after show food is inside the dressing room. If the band is particularly the kind of band that's hungry right after they get off stage, make sure they have plenty of waters in the dressing room or whatever amenities they might need, and then probably just to see if I can lock down a time with the promoter rep to do settlement.
I'm gonna tell you guys, and this is probably, I don't know, it's maybe not the best advice in the entire world, but I try to do settlement as early in the day as I possibly, as they will let me. Like the minute that I walk in, if that's noon or 2 p.m. or whatever, like, you ready to settle? You know, start planting the seed in their head that, you know, whenever they do have that extra couple of minutes, I mean, I obviously know that they're not able to settle with me that soon, but like I said, it's just planting that seed that I am ready to settle and get that part over with as soon as humanly possible, so that it is not something that I'm going to have to sit and, after everything else in the entire day, something that takes up that much brain space, being left to the very end. I try to avoid that at any way that I can.
Especially if you're collecting cash and you're going to have to do account.
Yeah.
It's so nice to just do wire transfers to the booking agent. It takes care of a lot. It takes a lot of less time. And
yeah, wire is great.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously at that point you need to go out and start, you know, making sure that your actual area, so going back out to front of house or monitors or whatever, and I mean, what's your process as soon as you've got your band settled and they're comfortable and guests and whatever, to go and start cleaning up the rest of your night?
I'm going to try to get on the stage fairly quick. So either usually like any sort of audio production we're carrying isn't in the way, so I can wait on that. But if there's even just to help the local techs out, you know, if somebody left their guitar on the floor, I will put that on a stand. You know, if the keyboards are off the rack or whatever, just kind of making the space cleaner so that the locals can start cleaning, but also that none of my gear gets destroyed in the process. So, you know, if there's something that's really fragile and important, I might start packing that right away. I mean, I do a lot of shows where I don't have access to hands or a stage manager that's touring with us, you know. So I just kind of have to call that, and, you know, like nobody can afford a new tracks rig mid-show or whatever. You know, it's got to be put away. And I mean, if you do have hands, I will let them know earlier in the day, you know, what the breakdown process looks like, and make sure that everybody knows where the cases are and what they can start breaking down. Because I mean, I have toured with bands where, for example, the drummer will not let anyone touch his drum kit because the stands have to be broken down a certain way. So it's important to remind people of that throughout the day.
That was actually kind of my next question that I wanted to interject with. You know, when you're out on a tour that you don't have a set of stage hands after the show's over with, you don't have, you know, one person or 5 people. How do you start setting that expectation with your band that they're responsible to walk back up on stage and pick up that guitar that they left on the ground and pack that up? That, you know, you don't possibly have enough time.
I have a conversation
with.
Sorry, I have a conversation with them before the tour starts, like responsibilities, who's in charge of what, like what can I and can't I ask you, and what I need versus what you want to do, you know?
Yeah, it's super important.
Sometimes you learn on the road as well, and you'll have to shift some kind of gears, or things will just naturally fall into place sometimes. I have no problem telling somebody if they don't want to carry gear, load out and pack. Or sometimes if you're in a van, there's just not enough use for, 5 sets of hands. Maybe you say, oh, then your job for the night is to make sure all the water from the dressing room gets into the van. And your job is to make sure we don't forget the merch, or, you can give people jobs. And I've never had, I've had one person rebel completely, but I don't tour them anymore. Problem solved.
There's always one.
You're lucky. I had like
yeah.
three people on one tour say like, wait, we have to pack up right after we're done. Can't we just hang out in the dressing room and drink beer? Like, they just didn't get it,
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
I usually give them like some amount of time. So like, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever, till the venue clears out maybe. Cause like, it really kind of ruins like the rock star image when they start like taking their cymbals apart. So usually I let them know when the venue's clear and it's good to like come in and start taking their stuff down. And I haven't really been in a situation where I've had to like baby anybody about taking their stuff down. It's usually like, all right guys, it's time to go. And they're like, all right, cool.
Yeah, mine was like one band member, which makes sense, but it was 2 crew members who just didn't want to, they wanted to act like band members. Yeah. So there's that, but hey man, it happens.
I will say on my first big tour, like the first tour where there was a full crew and, 2 buses and a semi, my first show, like I packed up my stuff. I made sure I tipped my desk. I packed all the microphones away and I was done. And I went up to the dressing room and I started having a drink and the tour manager just kind of went, what are you doing here? And I, just having a drink. He's like, do you think maybe you should go and make sure everybody else is all good, and maybe you can give them a hand and help push your console to the truck? And I was like, oh yeah. And you learn. We're all green at one point, so you do learn.
Yeah.
And hope
definitely.
that the person teaching you is nice.
What do you guys use for your dummy checklist at the end of the night? Mary's face, just like,
yeah.
Because you will undoubtedly always have that band person that either 20 miles down the road, forgot my phone charger.
Yeah.
Everywhere that you go.
Always look at the outlets in the room. Look at all the outlets. I also, one thing I didn't have on my Pelican, I'll try to carry power strip depending on what type of tour we're doing. That's clearly labeled with my label maker, with my name and the band's name. Everything is labeled with the band's name, just in case something is left behind. But yeah, look at all the outlets, make sure all the hospitality that's edible is with us. And if it's a bus, make sure there's ice in the coolers. And one thing I learned is make sure if you're crossing a border that everybody has their passport, that it's not in their suitcase. Say like a lot of times you'll finish a gig in Seattle and you'll cross over to Vancouver that night since it's a short drive. I actually had a musician, we went from Montreal to Toronto, and we had the day off in Montreal and he stayed with his friend, and he ended up leaving his laptop and his passport at his friend's house, but he didn't tell me until right before showtime. So, and I said, well, your friend better start driving now. And that didn't happen. But I ended up having to be on the phone all during loadout after the show with the Canadian border. Thankfully, he was a Canadian resident. He was living in Berlin at the time, but I always have copies of everybody's passports. We went over last week. And which I will also say is just good to have when you're checking in a hotel and they need everybody's IDs. You can give them photocopies. It's totally kosher. It's, if you're doing maybe a radio show the next day, make sure that the van pack or the trailer pack reflects that. Maybe you don't need the full drum kit because the radio show has a kit. Just pack like the breakables last. It really depends on what the next day is like, but yeah, phone chargers, losing them that's a drag.
And constant.
do a sweep of everywhere. Just like headliner dressing room, every dressing room, the stage, like side stage, backstage, even the support dressing room, take the waters that are left, because usually they leave them. Just like check everywhere, and I don't know, as like a tour manager, I always go in and do that because I'm usually the last person to leave. And even if somebody else has already done it, I'll still go in and check again and find something, because they're just not used to like looking for certain things. So
They call it idiot check for anybody who doesn't know.
yeah, idiot check.
Yeah.
And it's surprising what people leave behind. One time,
Absolutely.
like we left like an upright bass behind. Like, how do you do that? Like, it's a huge item.
It's kind of big.
But it happens. You just like, it slips your mind. Stuff slips your mind on tour.
Yeah, I mean, as far as dressing rooms go, I always make sure to check under the couches.
Yeah.
Because we've had like wallets kicked under there, or, you know, that kind of stuff. And coat racks behind doors are a really good place to lose your coat.
Yeah.
Going back to the in-ears, I always, if I'm carrying them, then, you know, I've already have them in my case after the set. But if the artist likes to use them during the day, like I just make sure that they've packed them, and I always know kind of where their carrying case is, because you will like lose those so easily. Easily.
Well, after I do my dummy check of those areas, the last thing that I do, that's when I deal with, you know, settling at the merch or checking on the merch person and seeing that they're involved in that process of settlement. And, you know, giving the band 15 minutes of, you know, hey, we're going to leave in 15 minutes. And, you know, kind of same thing that Dana said, you know, making sure that you grab anything that anybody is going to want on the bus or in the van. There is never enough water ever in the whole world, apparently. So, you know, taking all of that you can find. And I mean, that primarily wraps up that part of the day, but you're still not done yet with your day. Because you still have to either drive somewhere or be driven somewhere, and you still have a hotel to deal with. I make sure that I carve out time in the afternoon, or oftentimes if it's, you know, a situation that I'm not going into the venue until later, I do all of my hotel advances in the morning. And I could go on and on and on and on. We could do an entire webinar over hotel advances, because I think they can be either the greatest thing in the world with their fantastic organization, or they can want to ruin your life in the middle of the night. The number one thing that I always make sure to get in my hotel advance, no matter what else is covered, is the name and phone number of the manager that's going to be on duty in the middle of the night when I arrive. I find that if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, if it's 8 o'clock in the morning, having that name and being able to, you know, 30 minutes before you pull up, have that direct contact with them and say, we are 30 minutes away. Could you pull out our key packs and tell me what the first name is on the rooming list? Could you tell me what number 26 is? What name is there? You know, finding a couple of like very, very specific, super, super key little tiny things that you can almost quiz them on tells you if they're going to be ready for you or not. So do you guys have any tricks that you have found that work when you're advancing hotels to make sure that things go smooth? I mean, there will always be the random whatever, but as smooth as possible.
I mean, I'll always call after sound check if it's a van tour and you haven't checked in yet, I'll call after sound check. Just say, hey, I'm with this group. I want you to know what time we're arriving. You know, we'll probably be there during this hour. I give them like an hour. Make sure that, you know, if you're in an oversized vehicle, to make sure that the parking is situated, and make sure that the keys are ready and that they won't be in the middle of a night audit when we arrive. Because that's always fun, right?
Well, and that's kind of another one too. When you're traveling with anything under like 20 people, making sure that they are well aware that that 2 o'clock means 2 a.m. and not 2 p.m. Because I mean, I have walked into more than one place with there just being absolute and utter confusion of, you guys aren't supposed to be here until tomorrow. No, that 2 a.m. is now, which is why I now, like I said, I insist upon that, hey, I want the overnight manager's name and a cell phone number to get a hold of them. Because we have all walked into a hotel in the middle of the night to find the night desk clerk asleep at the at the front desk. The midnight manager in the back office, taking a nap on the couch. So that's why I'm very, very adamant about having a cell phone number that I can ring them directly instead of trying to call the hotel and let it ring 50 times before somebody actually wakes up. The other thing, obviously, like what Dana said, that I think is really most important is the parking aspect of it, because nothing can ruin your night more than pulling up in a bus and them, maybe of telling you earlier in the day, yeah, we've got bus parking, and you pull up and 8 cars have filled up the bus parking. So I actually request them to send me photos. Like, can somebody go outside and actually send me a photo of where the bus is going to be parked and the cones that are blocking off that area so that my driver knows exactly where he's going. It gets easier the bigger the group you have. They are a lot more, willing to accommodate weird requests like that. But I also find, if you explain your situation, hey, this is a band and that we're finishing up a show at midnight and we're going to drive those 3 hours. When we get there, they're going to be so tired, and we, want to make sure that they're able to go to their rooms immediately. People will be a lot more willing to help if you explain that scenario too. I think all of us probably have a rooming list template that we use that gets sent out. I hope that most of you get to work with travel agents that make this whole process look a lot different. Because when I started out, I did a couple tours without travel agents, and I did it on my own, and that can be a brutal process. Have you guys ever had scenarios where you need to come up with alias names and that you need to really talk to the hotel about security?
I've come up with alias names for my artists upon the request, but sometimes that brings up so much confusion, as well as just an ID check, or I also insist, if I have an artist who has a hotel room to themselves, that I also be put under the hotel room, because I need emergency entry into that hotel room. So that's also another variable that can be a problem on top of an alias name. I mean, they'll do it, but when you're talking to the person at the front desk, if they don't understand why you're doing that, then it's always just a whole crazy conversation to have.
Yes.
I would make sure that I'm on all the rooms as a guest as well, because if I'm on a tour bus tour, I personally, I tend to be a really early riser, and I'll go to the hotel and get all the keys and bring them back to the bus for people. But a lot of hotels won't release keys if you don't show ID, and you have to be listed as a guest. So
I always just make sure that I'm the group contact, which gives you access to everything at that point.
If the hotel's nice, they're not always accommodating. I've had some problems before. I always.
That's when I whip out our hotel rider and say, "Here's my name, and this right here has been sent to your sales department."
And if you have a travel agent, they should know that in advance. So.
Absolutely. We are coming up pretty quick on time, so we're just going to go really quickly kind of through the checkout process, which is, I always make sure that I'm down at the front desk almost an hour before I've asked everyone to be there for checkout. That way, if there's some giant group checking out, I can text my people and let them know, hey guys, there's a lot of people down here checking out. You need to come down early to be able to pay your incidentals, et cetera, et cetera. We could probably do an hour-long webinar on the importance of the zero balance receipt. always, 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 from the very beginning, train your band and your crew to get a zero balance receipt, because the amount of times that later on you will get that email from the sales rep at the hotel saying, so-and-so had some M&Ms and a bottle of Jack Daniels and didn't pay for it. Then you can ask them, hey, and I've kind of explained to all of my guys out on tour too, that you get that zero balance receipt and just take a picture of it in your phone. You don't have to keep it.
Yeah.
Just have something that shows that you paid your incidentals. There's nothing worse to me than having to have the conversation of, I'm going to take your incidental charges out of your per diem if you don't start paying them. Because some people then use that and start to rely on that as, oh, she'll just take it out of my per diem. I'm never going to pay my incidentals again. It can always go all different ways. Master folios, obviously, when you're checking out, you want to, I find it easiest enough to actually ask for the financial person at the hotel to provide me that master folio so that we can go over any last minute things. I generally request that they send that to me in the morning before we check out so that I can start looking through it. And then they send updates. That way, if there's any giant red flags on it, I can know that I have the time to be able to go down and take care of that. How do you guys handle it when somebody is standing there waiting to pay their incidentals and there's a big line and it's going to make everyone late, the bus late for leaving? And I mean, I myself keep an eye on things like that, and I go, hey, jump out of line. We'll call the hotel and take care of this later. Don't just stand here for 20 minutes. We need to go.
Yeah.
Is that how you guys handle it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
do
nothing
about the
that
same
can't be
thing.
solved.
Yeah.
I'd also, what do you do when, say people are like, oh, I didn't have any of the room, I didn't have room service or mini bar, and they check out, and then you see a charge on, say, the band credit card afterwards. Do you keep track of everybody's room numbers for every hotel? Because I haven't done that before, but I have run into having bands eat a bag of peanuts that cost $20, and then suddenly there's a charge.
I take photos of my rooming list and just keep them.
Okay.
I generally upload them to a cloud somewhere, and then at the end of the tour delete all of them once I don't need them anymore. But I have that on hand just in case. It's also you're gonna have patterns. You're if that guy for the last 5 days has had a bag of M&Ms in his hotel room, and then on day 6 he goes, I didn't have a bag of M&Ms. Why'd they charge me for that? You can be like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Because it seems to me like you really like M&Ms.
I haven't had a problem asking band members to put down their own card for incidentals if there's a casual check-in.
I try to avoid that as much as I can, but I mean, in a perfect world, that would be the ideal
small
situation.
band tour. It's it doesn't take so much time, but yeah, I wouldn't do it for a massive, massive bus crew.
Yeah. Well, is there any, I want to throw it to each one of you last minute. Is there any last minute piece that you want to end this 3-part series with? Any words of wisdom that you want to instill in anyone? Mary has told me her computer's about to die, so I'm gonna let her go first.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and come back on my phone. I guess my things for takeaways would be, always say please and thank you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And I guess just try and work as a team and see that everybody's human. Nobody's trying to be an asshole. Everybody wants the show to happen. Everybody wants the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can't agree more about the please and thank you and the importance of it. And I really hope that kind of the state of the world that we're in right now really starts to bring that back into play and helping out people. if you see somebody on your tour that's having a struggle, if they're just having a bad day, go help them. You know, so it's not going to hurt you. Tiff, what are your last words?
I think my last words are that unless you've been a real jerk during advancing or during your day with the venue, like the venue is on your side. And I'm coming from this from somebody asking about like basically like what you can do if you are either you're running late or you're with a headliner that's running late, you're the support act or something like that. Like almost always I'm going to be on your side as a promoter rep or as a front of house person. Like I'm going to do whatever I can to help you out unless you've been a jerk. And then I'm still going to do what I can do, but I might do it a little slower.
I think that's perfect, and that's a really good analogy across the board. Yeah. That works for everything. Max, what about you?
That this job is all a learning process all the time. You know, the first time you drive into New York City pulling a trailer, it's going to be terrifying. You've never driven in Manhattan before, and now you have this gigantic trailer and you can't park, and oh my God, what is this day? True story. It's going to be overwhelming. And then, you know, the next time you come back, you're like, I've done this before. I can do this. I know it's actually not that scary.
Yeah.
And really, you're only going to get that with experience. So those first tours, those first shows are going to be difficult. It's going to get easier. You know, ask for help, as has been said, and, you know, really network with your peers. You know, like somebody's going to have a hot tip of a good parking lot in Brooklyn for you to park your bus. Just keep in touch with people and be nice.
I wouldn't say always, but for a long time, I've told people that on every tour, the experience that I gained, I just learned to fail better. You know, it's never going to be perfect, and I'm never going to know everything. And there are going to be days that I'm going to mess something up. And next time that I come to New York City with a van and trailer, I'm just going to fail at it better. And that's, I mean, you're right. It is a constant evolving learning process. And the only way that you're ever going to improve yourself with it is that experience. We could do 100 webinars and still not cover every situation and be able to tell you exactly what to do in that moment. Dana, what about you?
Well, first I was going to say what Mary said, and then she said it. And then I was going to say what Tiffany said, and then she said it. And then Max said exactly what I was going to say next. And then you just said what I was going to say. You'll never stop learning. It's, you know, it is ever evolving. I think that's one of the things that it will keep. This is a job that is very difficult. It's very tiring. You sacrifice a lot. It will keep you super humble. You know, I would say when the road gets tough, you know, I think I said this before, we're not curing cancer. You know, have a sense of humor, double check your work. It's really like, I was thinking today, just, man, the last time I was in Japan, like how great was that? You know, there's so many beautiful things about the job, and there's so many horrible things that come along with it, but take one day at a time, make sure you're prepared to be unprepared, which makes you even more prepared. And don't, you know, you'll never stop learning. I feel like we're on the cusp of a whole new way of working once we do get back in the shows, and we're all gonna be figuring this out again for the first time. So, you know, have an open mind, and have respect for the process. Because again, yes, we're all trying to have a good show. So, and if you don't know, ask, you know, make a post on SoundGirls, because people answer these posts all the time. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, I have to tell all four of you, it has been an absolute pleasure doing the last couple of weeks with you. It has given me a really, really good reminder, and has made me think back to some of the best times that I've ever had out on tour, and that they were van and trailering down the road, you know, you build a different kind of camaraderie than you do doing anything else. And so each one of you have said something during one of these that has made me like flash back to a moment that I'm like, that's why I still do this. And I myself have learned stuff from your answers, and I will take that with me. And I hope that every person that tuned in, you know, has picked up something that they can take with them at least. And like I said, it's been a pleasure getting to know each one of you. And I also just wanted to thank Carrie Keys for putting this together, because she's Queen Carrie.
I hope we all get to tour together at some point.
I think that would be the most amazing thing. Even if it's like a festival meetup at some point or something like that would be so cool. But, and also just so that everybody knows, once again, you can find all three of these on the SoundGirls.org website. You can also find them on the SoundGirls YouTube channel. And that's all I've got. So thank you guys again. And I will hopefully see you somewhere down the road.
Hope so.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Be safe. Wear your mask.